The Demon King's army steadily invades human territory, encroaching slowly but surely, leaving a young man to stand alone while feeling detached from reality, remembering his naive belief that his peaceful village life would last forever. Until a white-haired demon girl peers down with a mocking gaze, shifting the scene to a quiet countryside village where someone calls out, urging a sleeping boy named Alec to finally wake up, causing him to roll over groggily and question the sudden disturbance. As he notices a soft, heavy weight pressing down on his body, leading him to poke the intruder's side, eliciting a sudden flinch, and revealing his childhood friend smiling brightly right above his face, who sits triumphantly on his bed until he acknowledges he is awake, making him bolt upright and shout at Claire for entering uninvited, though she cheerfully insists his mother gave her special permission to enter. So he walks away, grumbling, until she mentions stealing a honeycomb, which stops him dead in his tracks with pure shock and excitement, as she stares back intently, declaring that eating it is mandatory, followed by a bashful smile that leaves him sighing in defeat. Alec chuckles to himself, enjoying the quiet morning in his small remote village, stepping out into the peaceful streets of Tancred where everyone knows his name, and rushing forward with the boundless energy of a carefree child. Dragged along by Claire, his spirited accomplice who always ropes him into mischief, who glances back with a playful grin that defines their bond as childhood friends, leading him straight to the local bakery run by her family, where they sneak inside to find a hidden treasure while her mother works nearby, gazing in awe at a large jar of honey that glows temptingly in the light, and crouching down to steal a taste, unaware of a large shadow looming behind them, which belongs to a stern figure blocking the exit with crossed arms, asking if the honey tastes good just as they turn around in sheer terror, revealing Claire's father Cedric, who laughs heartily before his expression suddenly darkens, causing the two kids to stammer out pathetic excuses while shaking in fear, as the baker's amusement shifts instantly into a vein-popping rage, forcing them to scramble away desperately as he roars at them to get out, leaving them standing dejectedly outside with steaming bumps on their heads, nursing the pain while Alec reflects on how often they get punished like this. Though he admits the taste was worth it until Claire whispers a new idea, mentioning a rumor about a certain grass broth that makes hair fall out, and manically suggesting they test it on the village chief, much to Alec's horror. Alec smirks with determination, agreeing to the mischievous plan without a second thought, prompting the duo to march off triumphantly on their quest to gather the prank ingredients, passing a kindly woman at a stall who cheerfully warns them to stay out of trouble, while a neighbor watches them go, scratching his head and predicting another disaster, causing Alec to reflect on how much he cherishes these stimulating days in his peaceful village, as the marketplace vendors wave them off with warm smiles and friendly farewells, sharing a quiet look with Claire that reinforces their bond in this idyllic world, before waving back enthusiastically one last time as they head out for their adventure, which transitions abruptly to a silent night where the moon hangs ominously in the sky, finding Alec walking alone through the empty streets, noting how early the sun sets lately, deciding to hurry back home as the winter chill begins to settle over the village, until he stops dead in his tracks, his feet freezing on the cobblestones as he senses something, staring in confusion at a nearby house where the silence feels heavy and wrong, screaming out in sudden panic as he spots a villager in danger and begs for it to stop, witnessing the man's face twist into an expression of absolute agonizing terror, before a sudden invisible slash brutally dissects the villager's body into scattered pieces, leaving Alex standing paralyzed and wide-eyed, unable to comprehend the sudden violence, as a dark, jagged shadow rushes past him with a terrifying, heavy sound, blowing his hair back with the sheer force of its deadly movement, and leaving him to stare down in horror at the severed head of the neighbor he just saw alive. Alex stands paralyzed, gazing down at the severed head in utter disbelief, stumbling backward into the shadows as the gravity of the murder sinks in, rushing toward the nearest building while panting heavily for air, and peeking through a window to check for survivors inside, only to discover a bloodbath where his neighbors lie brutally slaughtered, causing him to fall backward onto the ground screaming in pure terror, haunted by the vivid image of life fading from their eyes, and the realization that everyone around him is being mercilessly killed, retching violently in a dark alley as the horror overwhelms his senses, until the scent of smoke reaches him and a frantic voice calls out, belonging to a survivor who grabs him and yells to flee immediately, warning him with wide eyes that the dark kin have arrived, signaling the invasion of a monstrous legion led by ogres and goblins, who have already overrun the village under the banner of the Demon King, forcing the man to explain that the western side is already crawling with beasts, and commanding Alec through gritted teeth to save himself and run ahead, prompting the boy to sprint away down the road without looking back, racing desperately toward his own house while worrying about his parents and Claire, crying out for his father as he confronts a scene of devastation, and collapsing beside the fallen bodies of his family, begging them to wake up. Alec stands numbly in the street, his gaze fixed on a tragic discovery on the ground, realizing with horror that the corpse lying before him is Cedric, Claire's father, whose lifeless open eye stares back, confirming the brutal reality of the massacre, causing Alec to look up and spot a group of goblins surrounding a crying girl, who drag Claire violently by her hair while she screams in absolute terror, shattering Alec's fear and causing him to roar her name with unbridled rage, making the goblins pause their assault as she reaches out a desperate hand toward him, driving him to charge recklessly with a pitchfork, cursing the monsters to hell, and swinging the weapon with all his might to break their hold on her, when a sudden arrow flies at him, blocked only by a woman who dashes in front, taking the lethal projectile meant for him with a sickening thud, revealing his mother, who stares wide-eyed in fear for her son's safety, shielding him instantly as a barrage of arrows pierces her back again and again. Yet she turns to him with a gentle smile, whispering her relief that he is unharmed, before grabbing him and running desperately, telling him they must save Claire together, though her steps falter and she stumbles, her strength rapidly draining away, leading Alec to ask about his father, only to receive a tearful, heartbroken apology as she pulls him into a crushing hug, shielding him from the world one last time, taking a massive fatal blow through her chest that ends her life with a final plea for him to live, leaving Alec alone in the shadow of a laughing demon who mocks his inability to flee. Alec weeps over his mother's body, hearing a chilling voice from above, belonging to a masked demon who mocks him, promising to be his opponent anytime. Standing with his monstrous kin atop the hill, waiting for the boy to challenge them, igniting a fire of pure hatred in Alec's tear-filled eyes as he swears absolute vengeance, vowing to hunt down every ogre, goblin, and night elf in existence, and declaring that he will personally slaughter every single member of the Dark Kin, no matter how many years it takes or what he must sacrifice to achieve it, marking the end of the tragedy that destroyed his village 20 years ago, leading to a narrative shift where he describes training relentlessly since that night, revealing his adult face, hardened by battle into a full-fledged hero, currently gritting his teeth while clinging desperately to a thick rope, dragged through the freezing high-altitude air alongside his fellow warriors, tethered to a massive white dragon that roars a check-in to its passengers, prompting Alec to shout back that dying from a fall now would be a terrible joke. As the dragon enters a steep dive, sending the hanging soldiers screaming toward the earth, initiating the desperate Demon King Castle assault operation to end the long war, a suicidal strategy to airdrop elites directly into the enemy stronghold for a decapitation strike, undertaken by volunteers who have all accepted that survival is virtually impossible. A price Alec is more than willing to pay if it stops the Demon King's invasion, steeling his resolve as the wind roars, preparing for the deadly drop into enemy territory. The White Dragon carries the assault team closer, bringing the ominous Demon King's castle into view. Alec clenches his fist tightly, recalling the countless times he dreamed of this vengeful moment, determination burning in his eyes as he declares death to the Dark Kin, seeking absolute retribution. While the dragons begin their steep, rapid dive towards the fortress, initiating the final assault, but a sudden, unseen projectile strikes one of the companions in midair, piercing her violently, creating chaos as they crash into the castle, urging each other to advance despite the heavy ambush, where skeletal warriors immediately rise to block their path, overwhelming the assault team with sheer numbers, forcing the cleric to step forward, raising her staff to repel the darkness with a blinding holy light, and urging the group to press forward immediately, dismissing any praise for her life-saving magic. As they near the throne room, only for a sudden high-speed threat to interrupt their advance, causing a look of pure shock to widen the warrior's eyes as an unseen attacker strikes, making the dwarf warrior flinch, sensing a lethal presence closing in far too quickly to react, followed by a spear impaling a defender with terrifying speed, leaving him gasping in sudden agony. and revealing a towering silhouette that strikes fear into the group as they scream about reinforcements, leaving Alec to stare in disbelief, realizing the enemy defense has mobilized much faster than anticipated, until an older comrade steps in to block the path, urging Alec to continue alone while he buys time, screaming for hero Alexander to run, forcing Alec to leave his friend behind with a heavy heart. So he sprints down the corridor, leaving the brave knight to face certain death against the shadowy pursuer, until a blinding flash and a heavy impact echo through the hall, signaling the end of the skirmish, revealing the face of a terrifyingly strong opponent who stands victorious amidst the carnage. A sharp gaze narrows, focusing intensely on the ultimate enemy sitting before him, where the Demon King sits upon his throne, radiating an aura of absolute dominance, slowly rising to his feet while gripping a massive spear with casual strength, and glaring down with a terrifying expression, declaring himself the true Lord of Demons, unleashing a catastrophic wave of dark energy that blasts outward with crushing force, forcing Alec to plant his feet and withstand the overwhelming pressure of the magical storm, before calling upon a holy light to coat his blade, rejecting any thought of retreat, and lunging forward with a desperate roar to deliver a strike with everything he has. But reality proves to be far crueler than his resolve, as the Demon King intercepts him instantly, wielding his spear with godlike speed, locking eyes in a split-second standoff where a single mistake means instant death, forcing Alec to slip past a lethal thrust by a hair's breadth to close the distance, spinning inside the enemy's guard while the deadly spear point whizzes past his ear, and driving his blade directly at the Demon King's exposed neck for a kill shot, connecting solidly with the target in what should have been a fatal blow, only to feel the steel screech uselessly against skin harder than diamond, shattering his hope as the attack deflects harmlessly without leaving a single scratch, leaving Alec frozen in shock as his weapon is repelled by the monster's invulnerability, until a comrade knocks him aside, taking the fatal counterattack meant for the hero, triggering a fleeting, painful memory of a girl's smile amidst the despair. A skeletal guardian shatters into pieces, clearing the path for Alec's desperate charge, allowing him to grip his sword with renewed conviction amidst the chaos, clashing violently against the Demon King's spear in a spark-filled test of strength, but the tyrant barely flinches, looking past the weapon with cold, amused eyes, and breaking into a twisted, mocking grin that ridicules Alec's 20 years of effort, forcing the hero to recall the hellish training he endured just to reach this moment, screaming for the holy light to bless his blade one last time for a miracle, and swinging with every ounce of his soul, aiming to cleave the monster in two, only to stop dead in his tracks, realizing his strongest attack failed to penetrate, as the Demon King moves with blinding speed, preparing to crush the hero's hope, followed by a massive hand that snatches Alec from the air before he can react, lifting him high by the throat and praising him for being a surprisingly entertaining toy, leaving Alec to dangle helplessly, choking on his own blood as his strength evaporates, while the monster licks his lips, commenting that the hero looks incredibly appetizing, deciding that Alec shall serve as immediate nourishment rather than a worthy opponent, opening a maw filled with razor-sharp teeth to consume his prey alive, biting down with a gruesome crunch that severs flesh and bone in an instant, sending the hero's severed arm tumbling through the air to hit the cold floor, marking the tragic end of Alec's journey as he dies with his vengeance unfulfilled, solidifying the terrifying reign of Gordeau, the Demon King of the Darkkin. The Demon King gloats with blood smeared on his face, claiming victory by his own hand, while Alec's severed arm tumbles helplessly into the darkness below, followed by a vision of Claire appearing in the void to watch his soul drift away, until the scene shifts to the Demon King staring in surprise at a newborn's fierce expression, causing Alec's consciousness to reel in confusion as he refuses to accept the battle is over, reaching out blindly into the light while insisting that he can still fight, but freezing as he sees a tiny, chubby hand and hears voices announcing a healthy boy, watching helplessly as the Demon King carries him off and names him Yilbagius, while a woman's voice rejoices at finally bearing a child, leaving Alec stunned, as his new mother cradles him, declaring that he is destined to become the Demon King, leaving Alec to stare in absolute horror, questioning if such a cruel fate is permissible, realizing that he, the hero, has been reincarnated as a baby of the hated Darkkin. But he grasps this as a miraculous second chance, understanding his destiny hasn't ended, and stares at the Demon King's back, vowing to use this perfect position to kill him, plotting to use his new demon body to exterminate the monster race from within, and swearing to finally achieve the vengeance he promised to his slaughtered village. Marking the strange twist of fate, where the fallen hero rises as the demon prince, shifting time forward as he begins his new life, carried through the castle by a servant, where he hides from his tutors as a young boy to secretly explore the castle, peering from the shadows to gather intelligence and find a weakness in his enemies. The former hero lands solidly on his new feet, reintroducing himself as Alexander, now living as the 2-year-old demon prince Gilbagius, physically accelerated to appear 5, clenching his fist in frustration over the 20 years of human effort he lost. While cursing the demon race and his father for the atrocities they committed, reflecting on the humiliating infancy spent helplessly crying and nursing day after day. But now mobile, he dedicates his time to secretly exploring the vast castle, mapping the years since his death in the ongoing war that still ravages the world, peeking carefully from the shadows, searching for any opportunity to undermine his enemies, pondering if he could somehow smuggle vital intelligence to the struggling human alliance. Yet realizing his isolation makes contact impossible without exposing his true identity. Glaring through a window, impatient that full demon maturity requires another 13 years, a wait that feels agonizingly long for a soul burning with vengeance. Deciding that he must maximize his current limitations to prepare for the future, and grow stronger rapidly until he gains the freedom to strike on his own terms. Until he is suddenly snatched from behind by a smiling demon woman named Sophia, who cheerfully ignores his shock, declaring that it is time for his daily studies, carrying him off like luggage while he screams about wanting to explore instead, leaving him to pout as she organizes the library, seemingly impervious to his complaints, revealing herself as a demon of knowledge contracted to mold him into a wise ruler, sending him running away screaming, desperate to kill the demon king rather than become him. Sophia wails dramatically to the queen, complaining that the young prince refuses to study, drawing a terrifying aura from his mother, who peers intensely over her fan, standing silently beside the smug tutor while radiating an intimidating pressure, forcing the servants to lower their heads in fear of the tense atmosphere, leaving Gilbagius to sulk in the chair of reflection as punishment for his rebellion, complaining about the pain while his mother scolds him to behave properly, comparing him to the first prince, who mastered academics by age 3, and warning that failing to surpass him will only lead to future hardship, causing Gilbagius to narrow his eyes, dwelling on the hated name he now bears, and the cursed destiny pronounced at his birth that he is to become the Demon King. Looking down as he reaffirms his goal is not to rule, but to kill the tyrant, until his mother sighs at his stubbornness, suddenly deciding to exempt him from standard lessons, shocking both Gilbagius and Sophia, who exclaim in surprise at the unexpected permission, as Sophia celebrates, stating she will allow bruises as long as they don't require major healing, boasting that as a demon of knowledge, she has perfectly mastered all martial arts, and adjusting her monocle with a sadistic grin, eager to physically educate the prince, provoking Gilbagius to glare back, unimpressed by the arrogance of a mere mid-ranking demon, leading to a chase as Sophia declares it is time for his physical lesson, where Gilbagius launches a surprise attack, hoping to catch her off guard, only for her to easily intercept his strikes, turning the hallway into a battlefield. Gilbagius puts his entire weight into a fierce punch, aiming to catch his tutor off guard, but Sophia catches his tiny fist effortlessly in her palm, stopping his momentum instantly, flipping him over her shoulder with fluid grace and slamming him onto the hard floor, praising his aggressive spirit with a smug grin while adjusting her disheveled clothes. Before questioning where a toddler learned such refined movements, her expression sharpening with suspicion, causing Gilbagius to panic, realizing he displayed combat skills far beyond the capacity of a 2-year-old, quickly rubbing his sore arm and lying that he merely imitated soldiers he watched training, leaving Sophia to hum thoughtfully, though she seems unconvinced by his hasty excuse, driving him to launch another barrage of strikes to distract her from digging deeper into his secrets. Noticing that her defensive movements are fluid and unlike typical brute force and demon styles, realizing with a jolt of shock that he recognizes her specific fighting stance, identifying her technique as the specialized close-quarters combat taught by the Holy Church to humans, asking if it is acceptable for a proud demon to use a fighting style created by humans, receiving a cheerful reply that effectiveness is all that matters to her, regardless of origin. Boasting that as the demon of knowledge, she can perfectly reproduce any technique she sees, narrowing her eyes behind her monocle as she prepares to thoroughly beat the lesson into his body, fearing that continuing the fight will expose his own human combat habits to her keen eyes, suddenly surrendering with a forced smile, declaring he is finally ready to study instead, prompting Sophia to immediately point him toward the desk, accepting his surrender with a victorious grin, and presenting him with a sheet of paper covered in complex alien demon script. Gilbagaya screams in utter defeat, shouting that he has absolutely no idea what the text says, realizing with horror that the demon script represents a language entirely alien to human speech, which reignites his simmering hatred, reminding him why he can never forgive the demon race, recalling the diverse species under their rule while three servants stand silently nearby, until he finds himself back in the chair of reflection, facing his disappointed mother and tutor, complaining that the bone restraints hurt his butt while Sophia scolds him to focus, listening to Platifia compare him to the first prince, who mastered academics by age 3, but his attention wanders to the window, drawn by movement on the training grounds below, where the sight of a lone figure practicing strikes a chord deep within his memories, triggering a flashback to his past life, kneeling at a grave with a vow to slaughter the demon army, remembering how he volunteered as a soldier with nothing but revenge burning in his heart, kneeling in a sacred hall after receiving his holy attribute, dedicating his soul to the cause, spending endless days sparring and training, honing his skills for the sole purpose of killing, standing battered before an officer, receiving orders to deploy for the sake of his country, and sharing a quiet moment with a fellow soldier united by their duty to the motherland, until a messenger arrived with the crushing news of his home village's total destruction, leaving him paralyzed with grief as he learned his mother died after entrusting him to the church, haunted by the smiling faces of his family and Claire, whose bodies he never retrieved, causing a sharp pain in his chest as he fears he will be too late to kill the Demon King again, turning his anxiety into a desperate internal scream to hurry up and grow stronger. Gilbagia screams in frustration, shouting that he has no idea how to read the text, prompting Sophia to silence his complaints with a heavy punch to the face, sending the young prince tumbling across the room under his mother's watchful eye, though the tutor looks impressed that he managed to instinctively guard against the impact, adjusting her monocle as she suspiciously asks where he learned such refined movement, causing Gilbagius to panic as he realizes his reflexes were far too advanced for a toddler, rubbing his bruised arm while desperately trying to compose a believable lie, and claiming he simply watched and imitated the soldiers at the training grounds, which leads Sophia to analyze his stance against her vast knowledge of combat styles, noting with a sharp gaze that his technique does not belong to any demon school, freezing Gilbagius with fear as he realizes she is dangerously close to the truth. Terrified she will recognize the Holy Church's close-quarters combat style he instinctively used, until his mother intervenes, ordering him to abandon such imitation and learn noble demon arts, a mandate that Sophia accepts with glee, promising to go easy on him during training, boasting that she can perfectly replicate any combat art as she prepares to spar, leaving Gilbagius paralyzed by the realization that fighting back effectively will reveal his identity, resulting in a swift and brutal beatdown that he forces himself to endure without counterattacking, leaving him swollen and defeated as Sophia cheerfully announces it is finally time to study, forcing him to sit at the desk and accept his academic fate to avoid further suspicion, staring blankly at the sheet of paper covered in complex alien demon script. Gilbagia screams in utter frustration, realizing he cannot read a single character of the script, comparing the complex demonic language to a nightmare while recalling his human education, feeling his hatred bubble up again as he considers the nature of the demon race, recalling the lowly imps who scurry about the castle performing menial tasks, reminding himself not to underestimate them, knowing even the small ones possess dangerous magic, acknowledging that the beastmen servants possess physical abilities far exceeding those of humans, pondering deeply on the inherent fragility of humanity compared to these natural-born monsters, triggering a flashback to the day he learned he was the sole survivor of the massacre, staring at the ground as the crushing weight of his solitude settled upon him, bowing his head before a tombstone, swearing an oath to slaughter the Demon King's army, volunteering for the military with nothing but cold vengeance filling his empty heart, enduring rigorous training at the Holy Church even after receiving his divine blessing, swinging his sword relentlessly day after day, solely focused on becoming a weapon of death. Standing at attention while receiving harsh orders from his military superiors during the war, sharing a meager meal with a comrade amidst the bleak, unyielding reality of battle. Until a messenger arrived to deliver the devastating news of his homeland's total destruction, realizing that while he was busy training, the demon army had taken his final sanctuary, remembering the smiling faces of his loved ones whose bodies he never managed to recover, gritting his teeth in fear that he might be too late to kill the Demon King again, driven by a desperate internal voice screaming at him to hurry up and get stronger. Gilbagaya screams in utter frustration, shouting that he has no idea how to read the text, prompting Sophia to silence his complaints with a heavy punch aimed directly at his face, sending the young prince tumbling across the room under his mother's watchful eye. Though the tutor looks impressed that he managed to instinctively guard against the impact, adjusting her monocle as she suspiciously asks where he learned such refined movement, causing Gilbagius to panic as he realizes his reflexes were far too advanced for a toddler. Rubbing his bruised arm while desperately trying to compose a believable lie on the spot, and claiming he simply watched and imitated the soldiers training in the courtyard, which leads to a rapid exchange where Gilbagius tests her defenses with a sharp strike, forcing Gilbagius to realize that her fluid movements are unlike any demon style he knows, freezing him with shock as he identifies the specific martial art she is using against him. Recognizing the Holy Church's anti-demon close-quarters combat style, a technique meant for humans, asking if it is acceptable for a proud demon to use a fighting style created by humans, receiving a cheerful reply that effectiveness is all that matters to a demon of knowledge, boasting that she can perfectly replicate any combat art as she prepares to resume the spar, leaving Gilbagius paralyzed by the fear that fighting back effectively will reveal his true identity, resulting in a swift and brutal beatdown that he forces himself to endure without counterattacking, leaving him swollen and defeated as he loudly declares he is finally ready to study, prompting Sophia to immediately point him toward the desk, accepting his surrender with a victorious grin, and forcing him to confront the sheet of paper covered in complex alien demon script. Gilbagius screams in utter frustration, shouting that he has no idea how to read the text, comparing the complex demonic language to a nightmare while recalling his human education, feeling his hatred bubble up again as he considers the nature of the demon race, observing the elf and beastman servants standing attentively in the room, recalling that the lowly imps who scurry about the castle perform menial tasks, acknowledging that the beastman servants possess physical abilities far exceeding those of humans, pondering deeply on the inherent fragility of humanity compared to these natural-born monsters, triggering a flashback to the day he learned he was the sole survivor of the massacre, staring at the ground as the crushing weight of his solitude settled upon him, bowing his head before a tombstone, swearing an oath to slaughter the Demon King's army, volunteering for the military with nothing but cold vengeance filling his empty heart, enduring rigorous training at the Holy Church even after receiving his divine blessing, swinging his sword relentlessly day after day, solely focused on becoming a weapon of death, standing at attention while receiving harsh orders from his military superiors during the war, sharing a meager meal with a comrade amidst the bleak, unyielding reality of battle, until a messenger arrived to deliver the devastating news of his homeland's total destruction, realizing that while he was busy training, the demon army had taken his final sanctuary, remembering the smiling faces of his loved ones whose bodies he never managed to recover, gritting his teeth in fear that he might be too late to kill the Demon King again, driven by a desperate internal voice screaming at him to hurry up and get stronger. Gilbagius screams in utter frustration, shouting that he has no idea how to read the script, prompting Sophia to silence his complaints with a heavy punch aimed directly at his face, sending the young prince tumbling across the room under his mother's watchful eye. Though the tutor looks impressed that he managed to instinctively guard against the impact, adjusting her monocle as she suspiciously asks where he learned such refined movement, causing Gilbagius to panic as he realizes his reflexes were far too advanced for a toddler, rubbing his bruised arm while desperately trying to compose a believable lie on the spot, and claiming he simply watched and imitated the soldiers training in the courtyard, which leads to a rapid exchange where Gilbagius tests her defenses with a sharp strike, forcing him to realize that her fluid movements are unlike any demon style he knows, freezing him with shock as he identifies the specific martial art she is using against him, Recognizing the Holy Church's anti-demon close-quarters combat style, a technique meant for humans, asking if it is acceptable for a proud demon to use a fighting style created by humans. Receiving a cheerful reply that effectiveness is all that matters to a demon of knowledge. Boasting that she can perfectly replicate any combat art as she prepares to resume the spar, leaving Gilbagius paralyzed by the fear that fighting back effectively will reveal his true identity. Struck by a sudden realization that he needs an immediate escape route, abruptly declaring that he is finally ready to study, confusing his tutor with a sudden shift, confidently approaching the desk, planning to show off his literacy to end the lesson, only to be confronted by the alien demon script, realizing he cannot read a single word. A heavy stone tome is passed into the young prince's hands, who reads the title, realizing the stone block chronicles the founding history of the demon nation, touching the ancient surface while reflecting on how ignorant humanity was during the Long War. Acknowledging that humans were always fighting a disadvantageous information war they were destined to lose. So he focuses on the text, hoping to uncover the hierarchy and weaknesses of his enemies. Reading about the lowly imps who are treated as mere disposable servants within the castle, and noting that beastmen possess great physical strength but are looked down upon for lacking magic, wondering if humans are viewed with the same contempt as these lower-class demon races, which triggers a painful flashback to the day he learned he was the sole survivor. Bowing his head before a tombstone, swearing a blood oath to slaughter the Demon King's army, volunteering for the military with nothing but cold, burning vengeance filling his empty heart, kneeling in a cathedral to receive the holy attribute, dedicating his entire existence to the cause, spending every waking moment swinging his sword, focused solely on becoming a weapon of death, standing at attention while enduring harsh orders from officers on the front lines of the war, and sharing a meager meal with a comrade, finding brief solidarity amidst the bleak reality, until a messenger arrives to deliver the devastating news that brings him to his knees, learning that while he trained, the demon army had completely destroyed his home village, haunted by the smiling faces of his family and Claire, whose bodies he never recovered. Clutching his chest in fear that he might be too late to kill the Demon King again, driven by a desperate internal voice screaming at him to hurry up and get stronger. A heavy stone tome is passed into the young prince's hands, who reads the title, realizing the stone block chronicles the founding history of the demon nation, touching the ancient surface while reflecting on how ignorant humanity was during the Long War, acknowledging that humans were always fighting a disadvantageous information war they were destined to lose. So he focuses on the text, hoping to uncover the hierarchy and weaknesses of his enemies, reading about the lowly imps who are treated as mere disposable servants within the castle, and noting that beastmen possess great physical strength but are looked down upon for lacking magic, wondering if humans are viewed with the same contempt as these lower-class demon races, which triggers a painful flashback to the day he learned he was the sole survivor. Bowing his head before a tombstone, swearing a blood oath to slaughter the Demon King's army, volunteering for the military with nothing but cold, burning vengeance filling his empty heart, kneeling in a cathedral to receive the holy attribute, dedicating his entire existence to the cause, spending every waking moment swinging his sword, focused solely on becoming a weapon of death, standing at attention while enduring harsh orders from officers on the front lines of the war, and sharing a meager meal with a comrade, finding brief solidarity amidst the bleak reality, until a messenger arrives to deliver the devastating news that brings him to his knees, learning that while he trained, the demon army had completely destroyed his home village, haunted by the smiling faces of his family and Claire, whose bodies he never recovered, clutching his chest in fear that he might be too late to kill the Demon King again, driven by a desperate internal voice screaming at him to hurry up and get stronger. The chronicle describes the fertile lands and brilliant light of civilization found in the human realm, which the ancient ancestor coveted, swearing to seize it all for the demon race. Realizing that individual strength was insufficient and he required an overwhelming military force, leading him to wander the barren frontiers in search of power until he reached a turning point. Discovering the dark portal, an ancient gateway connecting to a realm teeming with demons, where he received a violent welcome that tested his resolve through sheer agony, fighting through a chaotic hellscape of monsters where blood washed away blood, enduring mental trials where mocking voices tempted him to abandon his very identity, confronting the demon god Cannibal, who demanded entertainment in exchange for power, staring into a giant eye that offered a hand in a sinister invitation, sealing a dark contract with a handshake that shook the heavens with lightning, clearing the skies as he emerged with the power to conquer the world, destroying human nations, annexing beastmen, and dominating goblins and ogres with absolute force, burning elven forests and subjugating dragons, channeling power through the dark portal, and finally taking his seat upon the throne as the undisputed Demon King, leaving Yilbagius to sit in silence as he finishes reading the heavy stone tome, contemplating the brutal history and the philosophy that governs his new existence, recalling the first king's warning to never underestimate numbers and to direct fighting spirit outward, declaring that without the great cause of invasion, the demon race would inevitably fracture, advising successors to drown tribal feuds in enemy blood to prevent a return to savagery. The chronicle describes the fertile lands and brilliant light of civilization found in the human realm, which the ancient ancestor coveted, swearing to seize it all for the demon race, realizing that individual strength was insufficient and he required an overwhelming military force, leading him to wander the barren frontiers in search of power until he reached a turning point, discovering the dark portal, an ancient gateway connecting to a realm teeming with demons, where he received a violent welcome that tested his resolve through sheer agony, fighting through a chaotic hellscape of monsters where blood washed away blood, enduring mental trials where mocking voices tempted him to abandon his very identity, confronting the demon god Cannibal, who demanded entertainment in exchange for power, staring into a giant eye that offered a hand in a sinister invitation, sealing a dark contract with a handshake that shook the heavens with lightning, clearing the skies as he emerged with the power to conquer the world, destroying human nations, annexing beastmen, and dominating goblins and ogres with absolute force, burning elven forests and subjugating dragons, channeling power through the dark portal, and finally taking his seat upon the throne as the undisputed Demon King, leaving Gilbagius to sit in silence as he finishes reading the heavy stone tome, contemplating the brutal history and the philosophy that governs his new existence, recalling the first king's warning to never underestimate numbers and to direct fighting spirit outward, declaring that without the great cause of invasion, the demon race would inevitably fracture, advising successors to drown tribal feuds in enemy blood to prevent a return to savagery. Gilbagius reads that the dark portal supplies the vast numbers of the Demon King's army, prompting him to ask Sophia if she originated from that very place, to which she confirms with a smile that she indeed came through the portal, explaining that the gate connects to a random, unknown location in the other dimension, and admitting that demons cannot reach this world without such a connection to bind them, leading Gilbagius to conclude that he requires a native guide to navigate that realm, visualizing a plan to destroy the dark portal and shatter the fragile demon unity, which would finally grant the human alliance a tangible path toward victory, steeling his resolve to accomplish this difficult task using his miraculous new existence, mentally addressing the first Demon King while touching the stone pages with newfound clarity, acknowledging that he fully understands the tyrant's ideology and deepest fears, and vowing to ruin those wishes by dragging the demon race back into savagery, pledging to destroy the nation from within by steering it toward absolute ruin, dismissing the autobiography as he bides his time for 3 long years, until the day finally arrives for the 5-year-old prince to visit the demon world, walking through the celebratory streets while his people cheer for his upcoming departure, sitting quietly in his room while Sophia expresses deep emotion over his growth, reminding him that the first prince formed a contract at 8, setting a target to beat, while his mother considers the political implications of him surpassing his older brother, leading Sophia to ask what kind of demon he intends to form a pact with. A demon maid smiles warmly at Gilbagius, expressing excitement for the future, while he rests his chin on his hand. A flashback reveals a warrior willing to forge pacts with demons to gain the power to defeat the Demon King. Gilbagius sits on a sofa in a spacious room, listening as his mother confirms the details of their conversation. She orders him to the demon realm to find a partner, surprising him with the sudden next-day departure. A massive building looms under a dark sky, while inside a bored voice echoes through empty, checkered hallways. Within a stone chamber filled with floating crystals, a mysterious figure sits upon a throne, watched by a dragon's eye. A young demon girl sleeps soundly, floating amidst a cluster of dark, jagged crystals in a peaceful slumber. Narration describes the endless wars led by the Demon King, commanding hordes of monsters to invade the human world, The hero recalls his past as a villager who became a warrior to avenge his slaughtered loved ones. Yet his soul did not perish, but found a new vessel, returning to the world as an infant. The title image displays the protagonist caught between his new demonic parents, marking his second life as a prince. Standing firm, Gilbegias vows not to aid the invasion, but to destroy the realm of darkness from within. A close-up profile shows the sharp, determined features of the hero he once was, steeling his resolve. The scene shifts to the present, showing the intricate, fortified balcony of the Demon King's castle high above the mountains. His attendant stretches her body, commenting on the fine weather and how early it is for their activities. She cheerfully declares it a perfect day for flying, while Gilbegias prepares for his mandated trip to the demon realm. Gilbegias stands outside thinking the sun is already setting despite her claim, marking the start of his contract journey. Walking through the courtyard, he observes the confusing time gap between human instincts and demon schedules. He recalls a childhood memory of being woken for dinner at night, struggling to adapt to the nocturnal cycle. In the present, Gilbegias lowers his gaze, still finding the concept of a wake-up dinner utterly baffling. Gilbegias looks up at the vast sky, realizing this is his first time leaving the castle walls. Staring up at his attendant, who announces their destination is the dangerous Devil's Nest, prompting her to glance upward as she senses a large presence approaching from above, which draws Gilbegias' eyes to a winged silhouette descending rapidly against the bright clouds, revealing a massive wyvern that lands with a heavy thud, kicking up a cloud of dust, and immediately pressing its body flat against the stone floor in a gesture of absolute submission, shocking Gilbegias, who is stunned to see a proud dragon bowing its head so pitifully, while his attendant walks past him casually, paying no mind to the creature's degradation, striding confidently toward the beast while asking if it is his first time riding a mount, and stepping onto the dragon's wing as if it were a mere staircase, displaying total dominance, leading Gilbegias to realize the rumors were true as he watches the creature accept the insult. Recalling that the Demon King's castle was built directly atop the dragon tribe's sacred hatchery, forcing the dragons into servitude ever since the first Demon King brutally conquered their ancestors, allowing the demon race to strictly manage their reproduction and control the safety of their eggs, effectively keeping the unborn dragons in cages as permanent hostages to ensure the tribe's obedience. A cruel reality that Gilbegias processes with a solemn expression as he looks up at the sky, understanding that their mountain home was stolen and their children are held captive by the demons, realizing this is not loyalty but coerced submission as he approaches the waiting mount, and stepping onto the dragon's back, acknowledging that the beasts have no power to defy their masters, while the dragon lets out a low, resigned growl, forced to swallow its pride to survive. Gilbegias glances back with a discontented look, his thoughts churning with dissatisfaction, considering the dragon's forced submission and wondering if he can exploit the hostages to incite a rebellion, until Sophia calls out from the dragon's back, assuming Gilbegias' mother has come to see them off. But the arrival is Lazriel, another queen, who remarks that she didn't come to see Sophia, approaching Gilbegias to state she came to greet the proud son before his likely death, and smirking cruelly as she implies that he won't survive the dangerous journey, causing Gilbegias to freeze as he senses a sudden, heavy pressure weighing down on him. Recognizing the oppressive aura as a deliberate magical intimidation attempt by the woman, realizing she is a queen equal to his mother and the parent of a rival prince, resolving not to be cowed, deciding he must respond to avoid being seen as weak prey, and flaring his own mana in defiance, meeting her pressure with his own spirit, prompting Lazriel to look down at him coldly, commenting that he is not a very cute child, before turning her back on him, seemingly losing interest in the confrontation, and remarking on the cruelty of sending such a small child to the demon world as she walks away, leading Sophia to touch her chin thoughtfully, agreeing that the situation is indeed harsh. However, she counters with a smirk, suggesting the cruelty might actually fall upon the other queen's child, making Lazriel stop dead, her expression twisting into a terrifying glare at the insult, and whirling around instantly, closing the distance to tower over Gilbegias once more, leaning in close to hiss a menacing wish for him to come back alive, leaving Gilbegias to watch her leave in confusion, asking Sophia to identify the hostile woman. Sophia scoffs at the departing queen, dismissing her as a gloomy woman obsessed with being number one, prompting Gilbegias to ask if the intimidation was an attempt to interfere with his demon realm entry, which Sophia confirms, explaining that she likely intended to plant fear in his heart before departure, warning that in the demon realm, anxiety becomes reality and could cause him to lose his way. But she laughs, declaring that her students should never be lumped in with such weak-willed cowards, causing Gilbagius to look up at her, listening intently to her unexpected vote of confidence as she leans in closer to ensure he understands, calling his name with a serious expression, telling him that such harassment is merely a sign of fear, but asserting that he is different, staring deep into his eyes, affirming that he is a strong child who won't be swayed, while inwardly plotting that he is her essential pawn to elevate her clan by becoming Demon King, leading Gilbagius to nod, thinking that compared to his past suicide mission, this intimidation is nothing. As Sophia activates a sudden spell, surrounding herself with a glowing magical aura to prepare for flight, and extending a hand as if to help him up only to catch him off guard, suddenly grabbing him by the collar and hoisting him into the air with surprising strength, tossing him unceremoniously onto the saddle, complaining that they have wasted enough time chatting before stepping onto the stirrup and ordering the dragon named Dark to take flight immediately, drawing a resigned acknowledgement from the dragon, who obeys the command without any hesitation, launching them into the sky while Sophia giggles, teasing that he smells surprisingly mature for his age, soaring through the clouds as they chat about the freedom of the open sky and the flight, until Sophia starts patting his head affectionately, annoying Gilbagius, who screams internally that he is a 30-year-old man. Gilbagius recalls the arrogant white dragon from his past who refused a saddle, claiming it beneath its pride, leaving the human knight to stammer in confusion about how they were supposed to safely ride, resulting in a ridiculous compromise where the hero's party was forced to cling to a simple rope, which led to a screaming nightmare of a flight where their arms felt like they would tear off, fading from the chaotic memory of that suicide mission back to the calm reality of the present sky, where Gilbagius notes that the current flight is far smoother than that high-altitude torture, admitting to himself that he is actually enjoying the stable ride more than he expected, until Sophia interrupts his thoughts by vigorously rubbing his head, treating him like a toddler, prompting him to hunch over on the saddle while enduring her excessive affection, until his attention shifts downward as he spots the landscape passing beneath him, recognizing the distinctive round wooden houses that mark the territory of the conquered Beastman nation, and observing the tragic sight of ragged humans and beastmen laboring as slaves under heavy loads, realizing that pure-blooded demons are rare, leaving only a few families to rule as lords, which leads him to analyze the logistical nightmare of managing such overextended territories, drawing a gaze of silent admiration from Sophia, who strokes his head with a gentle smile, as the black dragon begins its descent, gliding through the clouds toward their destination, landing gracefully in a fortified courtyard situated at the edge of a bustling city, where Gilbagius hops down to the pavement, dusting himself off after the long flight, following Sophia, who points calmly ahead and announces that the dark portal is nearby, causing Gilbagius to freeze in shock, exclaiming in disbelief that such a dangerous gate is inside the town. Gilbagius stares at the chaotic, leaning buildings of the strange town, confused by its disorderly appearance, while Sophia introduces the place as cosmology, pointing out a multi-armed demon relaxing on a roof, explaining that this lawless town serves as a violent sanctuary for demons and their kin, where new arrivals from the demon world stay to acclimate their bodies before entering the wider world, leading him toward the town's edge, where the familiar architecture gives way to a barren landscape, and revealing a massive, swirling singularity that shocks Gilbagius as he realizes it is the dark portal, appearing as a colossal sphere of absolute blackness that seems to devour the light around it, which Gilbagius compares to a hole in reality, as if the creator simply forgot to finish that spot, causing him to sweat nervously as the eerie phenomenon is far more alien than the gate he imagined, until Sophia stops walking, announcing that she will not be accompanying him into the void, explaining that her soul is too powerful and dense to pass through the portal's filter, warning that forcing entry could leave her trapped, so she must remain in the town to wait, causing Gilbagius to accept this and turn to leave, only for Sophia to suddenly call him back, looking unexpectedly flustered and shocked as she frantically exclaims for him to wait a moment, prompting Gilbagius to look back in confusion, asking what is the matter as she stares at him, before she composes herself, praising his calmness and admitting she was terrified her first time, advising him that while some contract weak imps, he has the potential to bond with an archdemon, stroking his head while assuring him that he need not search, for his necessary partner will find him, which strengthens Gilbagius's resolve as he nods, accepting her final words of encouragement. And turning his back on the world, he steps boldly into the swirling darkness to begin his mission. Sophia watches silently as the young prince disappears into the overwhelming darkness of the portal, standing alone before the swirling void that bridges the gap between their reality and the unknown. While Gilbagius feels his consciousness slipping away, letting out a faint, disoriented groan, struggling to hold on to his identity as memories of being Alec begin to dissolve into the abyss, until his boots make solid contact with the ground, signaling his successful arrival in the demon world. Snapping his eyes open as his senses return, staring blankly ahead in the new environment, finding himself standing in a bizarre forest where twisted pale trees loom over a silent clearing, looking up to see a pitch-black sun hanging in a blood-red sky, casting a paradoxical dark light, which confuses his senses as he tries to comprehend the nature of this alien, nonsensical forest. Observing the disturbing texture of the trees, which upon closer inspection resemble countless staring eyes, until a sudden realization strikes him, causing him to pause and tilt his head in confusion, narrowing his eyes as he spots a tiny, solitary figure standing motionless in the distance. Approaching cautiously, noting how small and insignificant he feels amidst the massive, twisted flora, feeling a sudden wave of isolation as the oppressive, lonely atmosphere of the forest weighs down on him, followed by a disorienting visual spiral that twists his perception like a sudden hallucination, and a polite voice that greets him from nowhere, coinciding with a sudden flash of presence, revealing a tall figure emerging from a shadow on the ground, startling Gilbagius into jumping back, prompting the prince to demand the stranger's identity while keeping his guard raised against the ambush. As the being tips a top hat with a faceless, twisted head, introducing itself as Otigos, the guide demon, and floating casually in the air to offer a courteous bow, surprising Gilbagius with its unexpected gentlemanly demeanor. Gilbagius composes himself, beginning to speak to the strange entity before him, introducing himself firmly as Gilbagius, a prince of the demon race, but finding himself immediately swallowed by the guide's overwhelming and bizarre presence, as Otigos scolds him for spacing out, loudly asking if he requires a guide, forcing Gilbagius to sharpen his gaze and activate his magical analysis, only to realize he cannot gauge the guide's rank or strength at all, prompting him to recall a sensing technique from his past life as a warrior, remembering how to perceive his surroundings in total darkness using sound echoes, and unleashing a scan, feeling a sensation like a deafening roar returning from all sides, revealing that the atmosphere, trees, and soil are saturated with immense, blinding power, realizing the mana is so dense that his standard senses are rendered completely useless. Observing Otigos, noting that the guide is the only entity whose mana remains unreadable, while Otigos bows, stating that guiding visitors to their proper place is his duty, extending a gloved hand to formally offer his services in showing the prince the way, and casting a spell that manifests a shining, sharp crest in the air, which creates phantom figures that collapse, demonstrating a strange calculation of probability, followed by a small object hitting the ground with a soft, final thud, leaving Gilbagius confused as Otigos tips his hat amidst the bizarre display, pointing his cane toward a glowing path, advising the prince to head that way, eliciting a blank, confused reaction from Gilbagius, who is baffled by the sudden instruction. Gilbagius smiles confidently, preparing to announce his identity to the stranger, declaring himself to be Gilbagius, a prince of the demon race, but he is suddenly engulfed by an overwhelming pressure that freezes him in place, as Otigos scolds him for spacing out and asks what he is waiting for, forcing Gilbagius to narrow his eyes and activate his magical sight for analysis, only to realize he cannot read any information or gauge the opponent's strength, prompting him to recall his past life as a warrior standing in absolute darkness. Remembering a technique to perceive his surroundings by listening to the reflection of sound, so he unleashes a scan, but the feedback is a deafening 360-degree roar, revealing that the simple trees and soil are radiating immense blinding power, which makes Gilbagius realize the ambient mana is too strong for normal perception. staring at Odagos, who is the only entity whose mana remains an unreadable void. While the guide bows politely, stating his duty is to lead visitors correctly, extending a gloved hand to offer to show the prince his destined path, and summoning a sharp, star-shaped crest that cracks the air with magical energy, splitting into multiple phantom figures that collapse in a bizarre, theatrical display, leaving a small flag planted softly in the dirt to mark a specific spot. As Odagos tips his hat from a headless neck, chuckling at the confusion, and gesturing elegantly down a path, advising the prince to head that way, leaving Gilbagius standing dumbfounded, letting out a confused noise at the sudden direction. Gilbagius approaches a massive stone gateway that stands imposingly within the dark forest, observing the ominous aura radiating from the entrance as if the building itself is alive, stepping swiftly over the threshold, determined to face whatever challenge lies inside, looking up at the towering architecture that resembles a fortress built for giants, finding himself in a decaying stone palace filled with rows of weathered pillars, walking down the desolate corridor while realizing there is absolutely no sign of life, triggering a sudden memory of his past self encountering a similar mysterious ruin, standing before a large wooden door, wondering if his target lies just beyond it, peeking cautiously through the gap, expecting to find the powerful demon he seeks, only to find a vast, empty hall with checkered floors and silent, arched alcoves, moving to the next door and opening it slowly, hoping for a different result. But finding the exact same empty hall, which begins to test his patience, checking yet another door with a desperate look, only to be met with the same scenery, staring into the repetitive void of the hall, realizing he is trapped in a loop, glaring with intense irritation, realizing he has been wandering through identical rooms for ages, screaming in pure rage after checking thousands of doors without finding a single soul, striking the wall in a fit of temper, demanding the endless maze to end immediately, until a door finally opens to reveal a blinding light, catching his attention, causing him to beam with childish delight as he rushes toward the changing scenery, only to be stopped by a sudden voice questioning the arrival of a visitor. Gilbagius enters a grand chamber defined by checkered tiles and towering pillars, lit by an eerie brazier, discovering a throne where a small, white-haired demon girl reclines amidst floating black crystals, appearing deceptively young and fragile, yet radiating an unsettling presence that commands the silent room, leaving Gilbagius unable to decide if she is a mere child or a bewitching ancient monster. As a sudden piercing gaze locks onto him, stripping away his defenses in a single heartbeat, forcing him to admit he cannot read her power level at all as she looks away bored, until she lazily asks if he is the one, before suddenly questioning why a human is standing there, freezing Gilbagius to his core as he realizes she has instantly pierced his deepest secret, prompting him to stammer and feign ignorance, desperately asking what she is talking about, which causes her to lunge forward with wide eyes, shouting at him to stop playing the fool, erupting into a terrifying, echoing laughter that shakes the very foundations of the stone palace, mocking his attempt to hide while rolling on her throne, declaring his nature is blindingly obvious, and pointing a demanding finger at him, ordering him to look at himself to see the truth, summoning a tall mirror from thin air that slides across the floor to stop before him, forcing Gilbagius to gaze into the glass, expecting to see his current demonic form, only to stare in horror as the reflection reveals the scarred, rugged face of Hero Alexander, causing him to recoil in disbelief as the magical mirror exposes the soul he thought was hidden, whirling around to flee, only to discover the entrance has vanished into a solid wall. While the girl giggles with sadist glee, finding his desperation incredibly entertaining, and launching a high-speed kick, mocking his silence as she initiates a lethal attack. Gilbagius struggles against a magical compulsion, forced to declare he is Alexander, a hero of humanity, shocked that his mouth moves on its own to reveal he is now a demon prince, confessing his treacherous intent to defeat the demon king, while internally screaming at his own foolishness, desperately clamping both hands over his mouth to physically silence the involuntary flow of secrets, collapsing to his knees as the girl hops down, fascinated to discover a rare reincarnation case, circling him curiously, noting that his soul survived the digestion process of the reincarnation cycle, and teasing him about the stubborn resentment of humans, finding his vengeful nature amusing, leaning in with a gentle smile to ask exactly what purpose brought him to this place, watching him tremble in silence before guessing if he perhaps came here to kill someone, staring with wide, mock-innocent eyes as she hits the mark, feigning surprise at his reaction, before bursting into a loud, echoing laughter that fills the entire stone hall with mockery. Clutching her sides in hysterics, declaring that his murderous intent was obvious from the very start, pointing a finger directly at him and commanding him to take a look at himself, summoning a tall mirror that slides across the floor to stand ominously before him, forcing Gilbagius to stare into the glass, realizing with shock that the reflection is undeniably him, showing the rugged face of his past self, Alexander, exposing the soul hidden within the demon body, causing him to stumble back in horror, realizing his deepest secret is laid bare for her to see, turning to escape only to find the door has vanished, trapping him completely within the chamber, while the girl smiles cruelly, calling him a cute plaything as she savors his desperation, and launching a sudden attack, declaring that since he won't speak, she will force a reaction. Gilbagius struggles against the magical chains binding his will, forced to identify himself as Alexander, the hero. He continues his involuntary confession, stating that he is currently a demon prince, admitting that he realized he was reborn after suffering defeat against the demon king, desperately grabbing his own mouth while screaming for his voice to stop betraying him, collapsing to the floor as the girl observes him, fascinated by his reincarnated nature. Spinning playfully in the air, she wonders if his soul somehow survived the digestion of the curse. Landing with a smile, she remarks that human tenacity is quite amusing, leaning in with an innocent expression to ask exactly what he is doing here. Gilbagius covers his mouth in a panic, trying to resist the magical interrogation. But she looms over him with a terrifying wide-eyed stare, demanding an answer immediately, forcing him to choke out the truth through the chains, admitting he seeks power in the demon realm, confessing that he intends to use his reincarnated status to defeat the Demon King. The girl places a finger on her lips, processing his treasonous declaration with interest, realizing with a smirk that he is plotting a full-scale rebellion against the king. Gilbagius's inner thoughts scream about the 5 agonizing years he spent enduring his new life, recalling the humiliation of living among his family's killers while hiding his true identity, believing that maintaining his secret was the only way to eventually seize a victory. Glaring up in despair, realizing his careful plans have been exposed by this unknown entity, while the girl sighs, mentioning a pact by cannibal that compels her to cooperate with demons, prompting Gilbagius to shout back in his hero form, questioning why a Majin would serve the demon race. The demon girl bursts into laughter, finding the very concept of obedience utterly ridiculous, while Gilbagius clarifies that he respects agreements, but is certainly not on the side of the demons, forcing the words out with difficulty as he tries to maintain his composure. Listening as she explains that power flows into the demon world to enrich it as a ruler's duty, before she leans back, marveling that he is a rare, perfectly preserved reincarnated soul, which causes Gilbagius to narrow his eyes, silently assessing the dangerous entity before him, until she smirks, challenging him to hand her over to the demon authorities if he dares, to which he replies that while that would be amusing, his intentions lie elsewhere, prompting her to mock him, asking if he seeks a contract merely for self-preservation in this rotting palace. But Gilbagius ignores the taunt, asking specifically what kind of contractor she considers suitable, leading her to spread her arms and declare that she requires a sinner who commits absolute taboos, causing Gilbagius to stare back with wild eyes, asserting that no one fits that description better than him, declaring that he is a hero, destined to protect humanity and fight the darkness, yet simultaneously he is a demon prince striving to secure his high status, admitting that he will likely abandon innocent people to maintain his cover from now on, visualizing a bloody path where he tramples those he should protect to achieve his goals, confessing that he has long accepted he cannot escape this contradictory, cursed existence, walking forward as he fully embraces his reality as a prince of the demon race, declaring that while feigning loyalty to the kingdom, he will secretly bring about its total ruin, vowing to trample on all familial bonds and become the greatest traitor in history. Gilbagius looks down, admitting that voicing his thoughts has finally awakened him to his own foolishness, confessing with a pained expression that he had genuinely felt affection for the demons surrounding him, including the night elf attendants and beastman servants who served him faithfully for years. Yet he vows to betray Sophia and Platyphia, dragging everyone who cares for him straight into hell, stepping forward to declare that as both hero and prince, he will stain his hands with the ultimate taboo, locking eyes with the white-haired entity before him and addressing her formally as the Majin, challenging her with absolute confidence to name a contractor more suitable for her desires than himself, causing her to close her eyes and concede that he is indeed a rare and exceptional talent. Before shouting in sudden anger that talent alone is insufficient to move a Majin of her stature, explaining that contracts require either servitude or a price for power, demanding to know his offer, asserting she is not shallow like Cannibal and requires a payment that truly captivates her interest, leading Gilbagius to deliver his ultimate proposal, stating simply that he will destroy the dark portal, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded, uttering a blank noise as she struggles to process the absurdity, while Gilbagius admits he lacks a plan but demands her cooperation to cut the Demon Kingdom's power, revealing the depth of the resolve he forged during 5 long years of silent endurance, which makes the girl realize the magnitude of his treachery, a hero plotting to ruin his own kingdom. Understanding that he intends to maintain his cover until he creates a fatal opening for victory, staring at him in awe as he approaches, recognizing the madness of the taboo he embodies, until Gilbagius grabs her shoulders with a manic grin, offering to give her the forbidden entertainment she craves, causing her to shove him away in panic, shouting that helping to destroy the portal is absolute nonsense. Gilbagius looks down at his feet, realizing with a bitter scoff that he has been foolishly sentimental, admitting to himself that he had unwittingly begun to feel genuine affection for the demons around him, listing the night elves and beastmen who served him faithfully as people he had grown to care for. Yet he vows to betray Sophia's care and Platifia's expectations, dragging them all into hell, stepping forward to declare that as a hero prince, he will stain his hands with the ultimate taboo, locking eyes with the white-haired entity and addressing her formally as the Majin, challenging her to find a contractor more suitable than a traitor, willing to destroy his own kingdom, causing her to close her eyes and concede that he is indeed a rare and exceptional vessel, before shouting angrily that talent is not enough, demanding a price worthy of a Majin's power, explaining that contracts require a fair exchange, asking what he will offer to gain her strength, leading Gilbagius to declare he won't offer something cheap, but a feat to satisfy a god, stating with absolute conviction that he will destroy the dark portal as his payment, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded, uttering a blank noise at the sheer absurdity of his claim. While Gilbagius demands her cooperation, admitting he lacks a plan but is determined to succeed, citing the 5 agonizing years he spent enduring his hellish new life for this very moment, recalling the bitterness of dining with his mother's killers while pretending to be their son, convinced that maintaining his cover was the only path to eventually seizing a victory, glaring at her, declaring he didn't survive this long to die here, and demanding her identity, prompting her to ignore his question and suddenly ask for the name of his teacher, causing Gilbagius to flinch as he recalls the many mentors from the orphanage and the church. Gilbagius stops in his tracks, murmuring the name of Instructor Meralda from his past life. He admits with a pained expression that he truly felt affection for his demon comrades, listing the night elves and beastmen attendants who served him faithfully during his 5 years. Yet he vows to betray Sophia's care and his mother's expectations, dragging them all into hell. Stepping forward, he declares that, as a hero prince, he will stain his hands with the ultimate taboo, locking eyes with the white-haired entity and addressing her formally as the Majin, challenging her to find a contractor more suitable than a traitor, willing to destroy his own kingdom, causing her to close her eyes and concede that he is indeed a rare and exceptional vessel, before shouting angrily that talent is not enough, demanding a price worthy of a Majin's power, explaining that contracts require a fair exchange, asking what he will offer to gain her strength, stating she isn't shallow like Cannibal, daring him to offer something more charming than a mere soul, leading Gilbagius to deliver his ultimate proposal, stating simply that he will destroy the dark portal, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded, uttering a blank noise at the sheer absurdity of his claim. While Gilbagius demands her cooperation, admitting he lacks a plan but is determined to succeed, citing the 5 agonizing years he spent enduring his hellish new life for this very moment, recalling the bitterness of dining with his mother's killers while pretending to be their loyal son, convinced that maintaining his deceptive cover was the only path to eventually seizing a victory. Walking toward her, he fully embraces his contradictory identity as a prince of the demon race, declaring that while inheriting the kingdom's will, he will ultimately bring about its total destruction. Looming over the small Majin, asserting that he will commit the greatest taboo to achieve his goal. Gilbegias stands firm, acknowledging that his declaration sounds like absolute madness to any rational listener, yet he confesses with a pained expression that he truly felt affection for his demon comrades. Listing the night elves and beastmen attendants who served him faithfully during his 5 years, and vowing to betray Sophia's care and his mother's expectations, dragging them all into hell, stepping forward to declare that as both a hero and prince, he will stain his hands with taboo, locking eyes with the white-haired entity before him and addressing her formally as the Majin, challenging her with absolute confidence to name a contractor more suitable for her desires than himself, causing her to close her eyes and concede that he is indeed a rare and exceptional vessel. Before shouting in sudden anger that talent alone is insufficient to move a Majin of her stature, explaining that contracts require either servitude or a price for power, demanding to know his offer, asserting she is not shallow like Cannibal and requires a payment that truly captivates her interest, leading Gilbegias to deliver his ultimate proposal, stating simply that he will destroy the dark portal, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded, uttering a blank noise at the sheer absurdity of his claim. While Gilbegias demands her cooperation, admitting he lacks a plan but is determined to succeed, citing the 5 agonizing years he spent enduring his hellish new life for this very moment. Recalling the bitterness of dining with his mother's killers while pretending to be their loyal son, convinced that maintaining his deceptive cover was the only path to eventually seizing a victory, walking toward her, he fully embraces his contradictory identity as a prince of the demon race, which makes Antindesis smile, remarking that he speaks more like a true demon god now, prompting Gilbegias to extend his hand, demanding the power before she changes her fickle mind. Antindesis suddenly halts the ritual, exclaiming that she forgot to check one vital thing, gesturing to an invisible gauge, assessing whether his vessel is sufficient to hold her authority, nodding with satisfaction, while Gilbegias wonders if the contract will simply make him stronger, and blushing slightly as she murmurs that she will confirm the pact just to be safe, prompting Gilbegias to extend his hand, offering it to the demon god to seal their fate. As Antindesis reaches out in return, her expression shifting to one of solemn acceptance, and their hands clasp firmly together, physically initiating the binding ritual between them, leading her to close her eyes and formally grant power to Hero Alexander in her name, while Gilbegias responds in kind, offering a taboo to the demon god in the name of Hero Alexander, followed by a moment of heavy silence as the magical vow takes hold of reality, until Gilbegias looks at her with a sharp gaze stating that the contract is now complete, gripping her hand tighter as his expression darkens, ensuring the bond is unbreakable, letting a low chuckle escape his lips, which slowly builds into a sinister, triumphant laugh, roaring that it is too late to turn back, startling Antindesis with his sudden aggression, and declaring he has caught her, his face twisting into a manic, predatory grin, before his body violently erupts with dark energy, convulsing as the power floods his system, creating a sensation like a repulsive, muddy torrent, rewriting his very existence from the inside out. While Antindesis observes that the power is overflowing his vessel, noting his soul was not empty, taunting him to rejoice in his death, as no one has ever survived accepting a demon god's power, leaving Gilbegias to reach out desperately as his consciousness begins to drown in the overwhelming surge of darkness. Antindesis suddenly halts the ritual, exclaiming that she almost forgot to verify a crucial detail, gesturing to an imaginary gauge, asking if his vessel can withstand the full weight of her authority, nodding with satisfaction, while Gilbegias assumes this simply means he will gain significant strength. Leaning in close with a flush, she whispers that she will proceed with the confirmation, prompting Gilbegias to extend his hand with a serious gaze, offering it to seal the pact. As Antindesis reaches out in return, her expression shifting to one of solemn acceptance, and their hands clasp firmly together, physically initiating the binding contract between hero and demon god, leading her to close her eyes and formally grant power to Hero Alexander in her name, while Gilbegias responds, dedicating a taboo to Antindesis in the name of Hero Alexander, followed by a heavy silence as the magical vow takes hold of reality. Until Gilbagius states flatly that the contract is complete, his demeanor shifting instantly, suddenly tightening his grip on her hand, trapping her with a dark, intense stare, letting out a low, sinister chuckle that quickly builds into a triumphant laugh. Yanking her arm forcefully, he roars that it is too late to turn back now, declaring he has caught her, his face twisting into a manic, predatory grin. Before his body erupts with dark energy, convulsing as the power floods his system, describing the sensation as a repulsive, muddy torrent rewriting the laws of his existence. While Antindaxis observes that his soul is solid, overflowing the vessel she tried to fill, taunting him to rejoice in drowning, noting the unprecedented amount of power he accepted, leaving Gilbagius to fall backward in panic, shouting that this sensation is definitely not good. Gilbagius inspects the glowing seal on his torso, confirming that the contract process is finally complete, but immediately panics and shouts at the tiny demon god to get out, realizing she intends to follow him. Arriving back at the ominous, dark portal nestled deep within the silent, twisted forest, where he wipes sweat from his brow, exhausted by the return trip, while the guide waves goodbye in the background, glancing back over his shoulder with a sharp, contemplative look as he prepares to leave, sighing heavily while adjusting his collar, declaring that it is time to return to the living world, mentally strategizing that he must first regroup with Platifia, his mother in this life, upon arrival, worrying about the dangerous political fallout if he publicly announces a pact with a forbidden demon god, prompting Antindacius to chime in, agreeing that revealing their true connection would indeed be problematic, explaining that since the contract is bound to the name Alexander, her authority is hidden from demon society, assuring him that unless she explicitly acts under that human name, the true nature of their pact will remain concealed, suggesting he simply feign a contract with a lesser demon, causing Gilbagius to realize the complexity of his naming mistake, leading him to casually decide he will introduce her as a mere demon of restriction named Anti, which hits the proud demon god with the force of a physical blow, shocking her with a sudden downgrade, leaving her trembling on the ground in humiliation at being treated like a petty spirit, while Gilbagius notices a sudden power boost, rewarded by the world for the taboo of blaspheming a god, turning to her with a refreshed, eager expression, asking if she is ready to finally depart, as Antindacius bids a solemn farewell to the demon world, stepping into the swirling vortex alongside him, marking their departure as the star-shaped rift glows ominously above the silent, towering trees, fading into the heavy darkness of the void as the journey through the portal concludes. The scene shifts to the bright, cloudy sky of the human realm, overlooking the quiet, crooked buildings of the border town cosmology, where Gilbagius shields his eyes, dazzled by the brilliance of the sun, commenting that it feels strange to be back while Anti stretches behind him, and noticing that his body feels unusually tight within his clothes, causing the fabric to creak and strain against his expanding muscles, until a button pops off and hits the ground as he decides to find his mother, leading the pair past the silent, timber-frame storefronts of the town, arriving at a corner cafe to find a familiar figure, seeing Platifia slumped over a table, looking completely drained of spirit, prompting him to approach her back and cheerfully announce his return, which causes her to stiffen before slowly turning with a gloomy aura and glaring with terrifying intensity while asking who this stranger is, shocking Gilbagius, who frantically points at himself and insists he is her son, forcing her to lean in closer, scrutinizing his features with deep suspicion, before she abruptly stands up, knocking her chair over in sheer disbelief, demanding he prove his identity by naming his attendant demon, to which he quickly answers, Sophia, citing their fistfight over his studies, leaving her stunned as she wonders if she shrank, confused by the strange height difference, and grabbing his shoulders, trembling as she realizes her son has grown into a man. Platifia screams in shock, gripping Gilbagius' shoulders as she marvels at his massive growth spurt, bursting into tears of relief and clinging to him while confirming that he is truly her son. While Anti observes from the side, noting that his transformation far exceeds any normal margin of error, leading to a flashback where Platifia weeps alone, distraught after hearing troubling rumors about his absence, revealing that while Gilbagius spent mere days away, half a year has passed in the human world, showing Platifia pacing anxiously as hours turned into months, her worry growing with every passing moment, as rival queens visited her quarters, not to comfort her, but to mock her predicament and spread gossip, laughing cruelly while celebrating the news that the youngest prince had gone missing during his first trial, bringing Gilbagius back to the present, where he notices his mother's haggard face and mental exhaustion. Learning she barely ate or slept, losing her standing in the castle while waiting for him, having spent 6 agonizing months in isolation, doing nothing but praying desperately for his safe return. Shifting the scene to a private room where the atmosphere turns heavy as Platyphius scrutinizes his companion, prompting Gilbagius to nervously introduce the girl, sweating as he presents her formally to his skeptical mother, naming her Ante, the demon of restriction, causing the disguised demon god to tremble with suppressed rage, while Platyphia narrows her eyes, staring intensely at the white-haired girl to assess her hidden power, noting that Ante's magical aura appears incredibly dense and suspecting a very powerful contract, making Gilbagius sweat nervously as his mother asks if his partner is a high-ranking archdemon, which he quickly confirms, while Ante giggles internally at the massive understatement of her true status, followed by Gilbagius deflecting questions about her powers, claiming the contract forbids him from revealing specific details, leaving Platyphia to smile with pride, interpreting the magic type as a sign of a formidable alliance. Gilbagius cheerfully explains he found a partner nearby, adding that he can't re-enter the demon world now, causing Platyphia to stare blankly as her mind struggles to process the absurd excuse. Before her gaze sharpens, realizing the implication that his spiritual vessel is completely full, erupting in sudden fury, demanding to know what this demon has done to her son, screaming about the gravity of the situation, refusing to let them feign ignorance of the consequences, yelling that Gilbagius can no longer form contracts with other demons to gain essential subordinates, and lecturing that relying on a single source prevents a ruler from achieving true greatness, while Ante observes the tantrum with a smug expression, silently judging the mother's intellect, which Platyphia instantly detects, freezing as she senses the unspoken insult ignorant weakling directed at her, making Gilbagius sweat nervously as the tension in the room spikes to a critical level, leading Platyphia to clutch her head, screaming that being called ignorant is the trigger that angers demons the most, suddenly shifting to a lethal composure, challenging the demon to prove she has the strength to back up her arrogance. Reaching for the hilt of her blade, she prepares to test the insolent creature physically, lunging across the room with blinding speed, initiating a spare while Gilbagius watches helplessly, glaring down at Ante with intense focus, checking the girl's reaction to the sudden assault, admitting that Ante's magical density is undeniable, confirming she is worthy of a main contract, as chains burst from the floor to intercept her, though she calmly declares that resistance is permitted. Finding herself wrapped in magical bindings, she tests the strength of the restraints with a serious expression, while Ante laughs provocatively, asking if the queen has already finished with her test, prompting Platyphia to snort disdainfully, shattering the chains with a burst of raw physical power,